Hey everyone, welcome back. Hope you're having a fantastic day. It's kind of crazy to think about, but we are now only a couple days away from our first actual glance at what these CDL teams will look like as we head into the 2022 CDL season. So the game released a few months ago. When the game dropped, it seemed like, man, we got to wait forever until the season actually kicks off. And now we are only 48 hours away. So with that upon us, tomorrow I'm going to put out a video where I'm going to predict what those matches are going to look like, who's going to win, who I think is going to end up being the sole survivor of that weekend. But before we do that, I want to give you guys some background and give you a power rankings video. So as we go ahead and bring up this bracket, you can see that we have a tier list for the 2022 Kickoff Classic. As we take a look at this, we have S tier, A tier, B tier, and C tier. And if you're new to my channel, I have always said that I make myself put 3 teams in each, okay? So there might not be that big of a difference between teams that are in A tier and teams that are in B tier, but just me personally, so that it's evenly spread out, I do whatever I can to put teams into each 3. So I have all of the teams listed at the bottom. They are just in a random order right now. I'm going to start with number 12, and I'm just going to work my way through. So without further ado, let's go ahead and, if you guys couldn't guess already, the team that I have at number 12 right now is the Paris Legion. So Paris this year is made up of Decimate, Temp, Fellow, and John. And when I look at those 4 players, they have had decent years in the past, but I'm not quite sure with the consolidation of talent that we had in the CDL this year. I'm not quite sure how well Paris is going to compete with that. Now, anything can happen. We saw last year towards the end of the year that Seattle squad was able to beat the Atlanta FaZe on land. So anything can happen, but I want to see a little bit more from Paris before I start to move them up the charts a bit. So number 12, the Paris Legion. And at number 11, I have their EU counterparts, the London Royal Ravens. So I will say I do not expect London to stay in this position for very long. We have Afro coming back, who is obviously the leader of that squad last year. Zero was in and out a bit last year. And then they have the 2 newcomers, Nasty and Gizmo. Those 4 together, I think as the year goes on, they're going to make quite a splash. I think they're going to be far better than they were last year. I do not expect to see them in this C tier long, but give it some time, and eventually I think this team will gel together. The last team that I have in this C tier, and this as of right now, as the season starts, I think is probably the most talented of the teams in the C tier, are the Florida Mutineers. So as I look at Florida, obviously you have the 2 coming back from last year when it comes to Skies and Awakening. That's the Florida duo. They were obviously always going to build around the 2 of them. And then they also add in Vivid, who played really well last year. Who knows what it's going to look like this year, but last year he had a really good year. And then they bring in Dave also. So there are a question mark or 2 with this squad. It seems as though, as last year went throughout, Florida was always that squad that if your AR and your flex, if Skies and Awakening popped off, then they could compete with anybody. Now that has been shuffled a bit, right? It seems like Awakening's moving his position. You have Dave coming in and maybe taking the main AR slot there. So things have been shuffled a bit with Florida, and I want to see how that ends up playing out before I move them up into B tier and A tier. As of right now, there are just too many question marks for me. Moving into the top 9 or over into the B tier, this is a squad that I think is very scary. I could see them anywhere throughout the A tier, anywhere throughout the B tier. I think that they're going to compete with basically anybody, and that's where we're at right now. Once we get into the top 9, I think these teams are all very, very close. Really, it comes down to any given Sunday. But at number 9, I have LAG, so the Los Angeles Guerrillas. If we go through and we look at their roster, obviously this is the best roster they've had on paper since LAG has been a franchise. There's no doubt about it. You cannot question that whatsoever, but there are some question marks. So you have Gunlist, you have Slasher, which when you put it on paper can compete with anybody at their position, the main AR and flex, there's no doubt about it. They have Asim, who last year played phenomenally well, especially once he got paired up alongside Hydra. The two of them were in respawns, especially in Hardpoint, were one of the most dynamic SMG duo in the game. And then last but not least, throughout the first and second stage of last year, they added Hook. And throughout those stages, Hook was basically the MVP throughout that time. So when you look at LAG on paper, the talent is off the charts. Now, the thing with most of these players that are at least on this roster is what other question marks are going to be involved, right? Are they going to be able to bring all the intangibles? Are there going to be fights? Is there going to be drama, bickering, nonsense, so on and so forth? That's yet to be seen. I don't think so. I think all four of these players are ready to win, which is why I said before I put them up here that I think they can compete with anybody on any given day. This is one of those teams where I want to see it throughout the first major or two first, and then we can go ahead and solidify their spot. Moving on to number 8. And again, this is a bit of a surprise. I know when it comes to scrims so far this year, this team has been playing fantastic. But for me personally, I am a prove it guy. I want to see these guys prove it before I start to put them in the top 4, in the top 5, like what you've seen in the coaches poll. So at number 8, I do have the Boston Breach. And again, I get it. I get that they are performing super well. I get that in scrims, they have been having their way. But this Boston squad of Methods, TJ, Nero, and Capsidal, there's just some question marks there, right? Yes, they're playing phenomenally, but like I said, I am a prove it guy. I want to see it. If they come out and they win the Kickoff Classic or they place top 3 in the first major or something, okay, this team is for real. And I think that the talent is there for them to be for real, but all of these majors are going to be played in LAN, in person, so I want to see them perform at that level. And once they do, okay, I'm ready to move you up, but like I said, prove it first, which moves on to number 7, which is another one of these squads that in the coaches poll that was on Breaking Point, a lot of people had in their top 4 is the Seattle Surge. So I know new Call of Duty comes out. It's a total different game. Everything is different. But when you just look at their roster, so you have Accuracy, who ended up getting dropped from the Minnesota Rocker last year, didn't find a squad after that. After Accuracy, you have Mac, who is kind of in that same boat. I mean, he played okay, but he was pretty average. And then when you look to finish out their roster, you have Pred and you have Sib, two people that we really haven't seen on the brightest stage yet. You can do whatever you want online in scrims, but again, show me in person. So I get that they're frying. I get that this is a new game. I get that they have the leadership from their veteran players like Accuracy. Just show me. So this is not a slight at them at all. I'm really excited to see where they end up and how they end up playing, but I do want to see it first. So that's my bottom 6. Let me know in the comments what you agree with. Let's go ahead and let's move into the top 6, starting with number 6, which I have the LA Thieves. Now, this one is difficult for me, and I'll say that because when I look at the teams that are left, when you look at the LA Thieves roster of Draza, Kenny, Octane, and Envoy, it's as good as it potentially gets, maybe outside of Atlanta on paper. Right? There's no doubt about it. But when I look at how those players finished the year last year and some of the success that they had, like Envoy, there's no doubt about it, is one of the best subs in the game. But look at his performance from last year. It might not have been the performance out of Envoy that we expected. And because of that, I just want to see them do it again. I think there's no doubt about it. Octane can compete with anybody. Even last year, Kenny was one of the best in the game. Envoy was a little bit down, and when Draza was put into his positions, he played really well. So I'm going to put LA Thieves at 6. I think that they're probably going to end up higher, but they are 100% way more competitive this year than they were last year with all of those roster moves that they made, which leaves me to number 5, which is the New York Subliners. Now, I will admit, okay, I'm going to fully admit here that I have NYSL here based off of what they've done throughout their careers in previous games. I will say it would not surprise me to see NYSL at the bottom of S tier. It would not surprise me to see NYSL at the bottom of B tier. I think the way that they are composed, I think it can go either way. So their roster of Hydra, Neptune, Clay, and Crim, this is a tough one because will Crim and Clay be able to compete at the highest level? Will Neptune be able to come in and have the sort of synergy that we saw with Hydra and Asim? Will that duo work similarly? So I think there are some question marks here. My guess is going to be that I think at the end of the year, LA Thieves is probably going to be a better team than NYSL. But just based off of what we've seen throughout the CDL in totality from the beginning, the first year and last year, I'm putting NYSL there out of just pure respect. We'll see where they end up. 4th team, moving on, I have the Minnesota Rocker, and I think Minnesota is a team that is super reliable. I think just like what we saw last year, they're always going to compete when it comes to S&D. If they figure things out in this game, in Control and Hardpoint, they're going to be really tough to beat. I think this is a squad that no matter what, I really feel like they're going to be in the top 6 all the way throughout the season. I just feel like they're that good. They're that steady. They're always going to give you a pretty good performance every time they're out. I'm just not sure they're going to be able to consistently beat the Atlantas, the Optics, the Ultras of the world, just like what they struggled with last year. A lot of seasons, they were able to beat teams that were beneath them, and then they would lose their matches to teams that were in power rankings higher than them. So I put them at 4th. If they're 5, 6, 7, somewhere in there, if they're 3 or 2, none of those positionings would surprise me. But I do want to see them actually perform at that level. So I have Minnesota at number 4. Moving into my top 3, and this might be a little bit controversial just based off of where teams are at right now. But at number 3, I have Optic Texas. Now, I know in a lot of the coaches polls, in a lot of the preseason polls that are out there, most people have Optic at number 2. I personally, just based off of the beginning of Black Ops Cold War to champs in Black Ops Cold War, I cannot put Toronto Ultra at 3. I cannot put them below 2. I think they were so actually, I don't even have to think. They 1,000% were so consistently the second best team in the league last year. And really, at the end of the first season of CDL in Modern Warfare 2019, they ended the year as the second best team there also. So I have Optic at 3rd just out of the fact that I refuse to move Toronto underneath 2. But I do think that Optic can show over time that they might be a better squad. I think in my heart of hearts that Optic is going to end up being top 2 by the time the second season rolls around, or maybe even at the end of the first major. But I just out of all respect for what Toronto has done the last year and a half, I am keeping them at 2, which obviously means the Atlanta FaZe is at 1. So Atlanta FaZe, what can you say? Will they be knocked off this year? I really don't think so, but is the potential there? Absolutely. Before all the roster moves were made in the summer, we did have this consolidation of talent, right? I've said that a couple times. So you take all 12 teams in the league, and the bottom 3, 4, or 5, the best players on those bottom 3 or 4 really ended up taking those players and putting them in the top 6 or 7 teams. And then with the realignment of the Seattle Surge and Boston Breach, we have seen those 2 teams also come to light. And now it seems like you have 9 teams that are playing super well. And I just can't wait to see what happens in this Kickoff Classic. So one more look right here. This is what I have for my S, A, B, and C tier. Down in the comments below, let me know what you're thinking. Yes, this is 1,000% going to change by the time the first Kickoff Classic is over, by the time the first major gets here. This is going to change, but for right now, that's what I've got. So if you're new around here, you enjoy this sort of content, I bring you this sort of information every single day throughout this CDL season. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. Leave a like if you don't mind, as it really helps out the channel. And with that, thank you guys so much. Enjoy CDL Kickoff Classic in 2022. I'm going to have a prediction video coming out soon, and we'll see where it all shakes out. So thank you. We'll see you in the next one.